Nero's story is a fascinating journey through power, extravagance, and inevitable downfall, a tale that still captures our imagination today. In this video, we'll explore his rise as the Emperor of Rome from 54 to 68 AD and see how his rule left a lasting impact on history. As we begin, picture a time when Rome was the center of the world, bustling with life, art, and political drama. This period was marked by rapid changes and ambitious personalities who could sway the fate of nations with a single decision. Nero, the last ruler of the famed Julio-Claudian dynasty, entered the scene under circumstances that promised a bright future, backed by influential supporters. His early years were filled with hope as he was a young leader guided by well-respected advisors and ambitious family members. With typical Roman flair and the pressure of enormous legacy upon him, Nero's ascent was both promising and intimidating. Throughout our exploration, we'll cover not just the administrative measures he took, but also the cultural pursuits that colored his reign. You'll learn how his early reliance on experienced counselors laid down the groundwork for what many saw as a period of excellent governance. Yet, as events unfolded, even the best beginnings can lead to unforeseen complications. We'll take a relaxed look at how personal relationships, political intrigues, and a strong desire for the public's applause influenced his actions. This introduction sets the stage for a story that is as human as it is historical, a story of ambition, creativity, and the clashes that ultimately doomed Nero's rule. Whether you're a lover of history or someone looking for a captivating narrative about power and legacy, there's something in Nero's life that speaks to us all. Get ready to journey back in time as we unpack the events that shaped one of Rome's most controversial rulers. Nero's rise to power started in an atmosphere of high expectations and cautious optimism. When he was appointed as emperor, the support of the Praetorian Guard provided an essential foundation. This was no small achievement in a Rome where power often hung by a slender thread. With Agrippina, his mother, maneuvering behind the scenes to secure every important alliance, Nero's accession looked like it would bring stability and promise for a better future. Even though he was young and inexperienced, the confidence shown by Agrippina and his supporters helped silence many early doubts, both within the Senate and among the people of Rome. During these early years, Nero was guided by two key figures who played significant roles in his development as a leader. First, we have Afranius Burrus, the seasoned praetorian prefect who provided much-needed military and administrative expertise. Burrus was not only a loyal advisor, but also a stabilizing force in a rapidly changing political landscape. His experience and pragmatism helped steer Nero through the initial challenges of rule. Equally important was Lucius Annaeus Seneca, a renowned writer and orator whose wisdom extended far beyond the bounds of literature. Appointed as his tutor in 49 AD, Seneca influenced Nero's early policies and introduced him to the complexities of governance, ethics, and philosophy. Under this dual influence, Nero's administration managed to establish a semblance of order and competence. Public policies were organized with a practical approach, and the early years of his reign witnessed several reforms aimed at maintaining the empire's stability. In those exciting early days, Nero was seen as a potential innovator, a young emperor who could harmonize the values of Rome with the demands of a changing world. His government began to shape itself on the foundation of sound administrative practices and thoughtful political decisions. This era of the early reign was crucial in setting the tone for what was to follow. It was clear that behind the pomp and circumstance, practical decisions were being made to secure the empire's future, even if later events would complicate this initial promise. In our discussion, we not only acknowledge the historical achievements of this period, but also understand how the guidance of experienced counselors played an indispensable role in molding Nero's early leadership. As Nero's reign progressed, the internal politics of the Roman court grew increasingly complex and fraught with tension. One of the most pivotal aspects of his early rule was the struggle over who would hold true power behind the throne. Agrippina, eager to remain influential despite her son's growing authority, found herself locked in a power struggle with a determined Nero and his rising inner circle. The situation was complicated by familial loyalties and personal ambitions. making every decision and every relationship a battleground for influence. Agrippina's attempts to continue as regent eventually backfired. While she had once been the pillar of Nero's rise, her determination to hold on to power clashed with the emperor's desire for independent rule. This friction culminated dramatically when Nero decided that no one should outshine him, not even his own mother. The move was as shocking as it was decisive. In a calculated turn of events, Nero orchestrated events that led to Agrippina's murder in 59 AD. This act was a turning point, signaling that Nero was ready to embrace absolute power at any cost. Other key events during this era also illustrate the deep-seated nature of the political intrigues that plagued his government. Nero's adoptive brother, Britannicus, became an easy target once it was feared he might rally support as a potential rival. In 55 AD, Britannicus was poisoned, a brutal reminder of how lethal court politics could be. Alongside this, Nero's personal life was undergoing radical changes. He divorced Octavia, whose fate soon turned tragic, and later married Poppaea Sabina, an alliance that further skewed the balance in the emperor's favor. All these moves were wrapped in the veneer of political necessity, but they also exposed the darker side of Nero's character. These decisions, while consolidating his authority in the short term, sowed the seeds of discontent among Rome's elite and foreshadowed the more tyrannical tendencies that would emerge as his reign continued. Without the caution of established advisors and fueled by ambition and the influences of preferred companions, Nero's rule began to lose the guiding light that had initially promised a bright future for Rome. As time went on, the engines of Nero's government shifted dramatically. Once he had secured his position, Nero began to steer his rule according to his personal whims. The trusted advisors who had once guided him, like Burrus and Seneca, gradually found themselves sidelined. After Burrus passed away in 62 AD, Seneca's influence waned considerably, and Nero soon turned to Tigellinus, a praetorian prefect with a far less admirable reputation. Tigellinus's lack of wisdom and experience meant that crucial decisions were no longer filtered through a lens of prudence, and the reliability of governance began to suffer. Under Nero's direct rule, the administration started to feel the strain of lavish spending and unchecked extravagance. Instead of focusing on stable and careful management of the empire, the emperor's policies increasingly aimed at satisfying his personal cravings, from dramatic public performances to ambitious building projects. His expenditures were not meticulously planned or geared toward the betterment of the state. They were simply expressions of his desire for praise and admiration. This approach chilled the support of many in the traditional senatorial class, who valued decorum, efficiency, and respect for centuries-old customs. Furthermore, the Senate's role was diminished as Nero increasingly bypassed traditional political structures. The once powerful body of Rome became nothing more than a rubber stamp for decisions that had already been made in the inner circles of the emperor's court. As the treasury emptied under his extravagant projects, oppressive measures had to be implemented to restore some semblance of financial balance. Taxation and harsh economic policies were introduced to finance his ever-growing appetite for new monuments and private pleasures, further alienating both the elites and common citizens alike. This period in Nero's rule marked a definitive move away from the early promise of competent administration to an era dominated by spectacle, personal gain, and instability. His governance, rather than being celebrated for innovation or reform, grew increasingly synonymous with authoritarian and capricious rule. The once bright hope for a meaningful and just administration turned into a tangled web of extravagance and exploitation that would have lasting repercussions for the Roman state. Nero wasn't just an administrator. He saw himself as an artist, a patron of the arts, and even a performer. The emperor's self-image was deeply intertwined with the world of music and theater, and he was convinced of the extraordinary genius of his own artistic expressions. Throughout his reign, Nero made efforts to showcase his creative talents in public, whether through playing the lyre, singing, or taking part in theatrical performances. By stepping onto the stage, he sought not only to entertain, but also to command admiration and replace traditional symbols of Roman authority with those of artistic brilliance. His public appearances on stage were a double-edged sword. While many common Romans might have found a refreshing novelty in the performances, the established elite frowned upon an emperor turning into a performer. In their eyes, political leadership and the arts belonged in distinctly separate arenas. His participation in major Greek festivals, such as the Olympian and Delphic Games, further blurred these boundaries and invited criticism from those who valued the dignity of Rome's political office over theatrical spectacle. This cultural pursuit reflected a deeper tension within Nero's character, a desire to be remembered not only as a ruler, but also as an artist who contributed to the cultural landscape of his time. However, the heavy emphasis on personal performance did little to mask the growing discontent among the ranks of his advisors and the aristocracy. Over time, this focus on self-promotion undermined the traditional virtues of restraint and duty expected of leaders. Still, his flamboyance and unique flair for showmanship left a lasting imprint on how future generations would remember him, a ruler who was as much a performer as he was an emperor, blending art and politics in ways that were both groundbreaking and emotionally charged. A major turning point in Nero's reign came in 64 AD, when a massive fire swept through Rome, lasting 6 long days and wreaking havoc on much of the city. The inferno was devastating, leaving countless Romans homeless and destroying large sections of Rome's ancient urban fabric. Even though historical accounts vary, there was speculation that Nero might have exploited this disaster to implement his imperial redesign plans. Seizing the moment, he embarked on ambitious reconstruction projects and built his grand Golden House, a lavish palace that would come to symbolize both his extravagance and his controversial rule. In the chaotic aftermath of the fire, people struggled to explain the calamity and find someone to blame. Rumors swirled that Nero was responsible, though there is no definitive proof to support that claim. Instead, looking for a scapegoat, the emperor cast suspicion on a small group of people who were already viewed with mistrust: Christians. This marked the first significant persecution of Christians in Rome. Public shaming, brutal punishments, and cruel executions became the order of the day, as many Christians were held responsible for the disaster, despite their lack of any real evidence linking them to the blaze. Witnessing the destruction, many Romans had mixed feelings of sorrow, fear, and anger, and the targeting of Christians provided an outlet for these emotions. The persecution was not just an act of cruelty, but also a calculated political move. By directing public anger toward a vulnerable group, Nero could distract attention from his own mismanagement and reassert his dominance during a time of crisis. What might have been an opportunity for reform was thus transformed into a period marked by further alienation and instability, revealing the darker sides of Nero's administration. Outside Rome's borders, challenges to Roman authority added yet another layer of intensity to Nero's rule. In the east, the Armenian problem demanded attention. After the rise of Vologases on the Parthian throne, Rome found itself engaged in a power play revolving around Armenia. With Tiridates set up as a puppet ruler and Corbulo leading the Roman legions, this campaign was crucial for reasserting Rome's suzerainty. Corbulo's efforts culminated in forcing Vologases to negotiate, ensuring that Armenia remained nominally under Roman control, even if its rulers were not entirely free. Meanwhile, in Britain, the seeds of rebellion began to sprout under the strain of harsh Roman administration. The revolt, led by Boudica, queen of the Iceni, resulted in the destruction of several Roman towns including Camulodunum, Verulamium, and Londinium. The uprising, fueled by oppressive practices and local resentment, demonstrated that external pressures could combine with internal discontent to create formidable challenges for Nero's leadership. These military and frontier crises, though handled with varying degrees of success, added pressure to an already strained imperial system and deepened the challenges Nero faced from all sides. The final chapter of Nero's tumultuous tale is one of betrayal, rebellion, and a dramatic fall from power. As his erratic policies and lavish spending alienated both the elites and the army, the seeds of his downfall were sown long before his final days. A series of treason trials, notably the notorious conspiracy of Piso in 65 AD, only deepened the sense of insecurity within Rome. Even well-respected figures, such as the poet Lucan and the Stoic senators Thrasea Paetus and Borea Sonaris, fell victim to Nero's ruthless pursuit of control, a pursuit that ultimately proved self-destructive. Simultaneously, discontent on the frontiers began to boil over. In Gaul, a rebellion led by Caius Julius Vindex captured the public's attention, inspiring segments of the military to rally against Nero's misrule. Although initial successes against Vindex suggested that the emperor would be fiercely defended, the loyalty of the legions soon shifted. Leaders like Sulpicius Galba and even segments of the German command turned their backs on Nero. Faced with betrayal and insurmountable pressure, Nero's fate was sealed. His eventual flight from Rome ended in tragedy, with his own loyal freedmen carrying out the final act that brought an end to his life and to the Julio-Claudian dynasty. In reflecting on Nero's legacy, we see a ruler who was at times both innovative and brutally capricious, a man whose cultural ambitions and personal excesses overshadowed the initial promise of effective governance. Today, Nero remains a figure who exemplifies the complexities of power, an enduring lesson about the fine line between visionary leadership and self-destruction. His life and reign continue to captivate historians and storytellers alike, serving as a cautionary tale of how unchecked ambition and personal indulgence can lead to a ruler's downfall, leaving a lasting impact on history.